to the Why You're Wrong Fantasy Football Podcast. We are on episode 33, but more importantly, we are on the first episode of the season where we get to discuss matchups, pickups, waivers, and everything we love about fantasy football because it is now week 2 of the NFL and an amazing kickoff to week 1 with just some of the most exciting games you might have even had all season. It's a very special way to start off our year, guys. How you doing today?
We're rocking and rolling, baby.
We're rocking. Thursday night football, Sunday night football, and Monday night football were all crazy good games. I mean, it's not gonna last the entire season, but those were 3 epic games to start week 1.
It was electric.
It is just like I'm so excited for Thursday. I just want more football in my life. But as always, I am John. I'm your monotone master. We've got Bryan, our fantasy force here, and the raging Rumney has returned to the podcast for this season. You can hear us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out the show on YouTube, or you can find us on social media, TikTok and Instagram as Why You're Wrong FFB, and on Twitter as You're Wrong FFB. We've got a loaded episode for you guys today, but we're going to get off with some week 1 headlines that I've all prepared. So mine has to do with the Thursday night game, and all I can say is Zeke is fine. Everyone that's panicking, just relax a bit. He went up against a great defense, which has an amazing front 7. The Cowboys were playing with injuries on the offensive line, and the Buccaneers had injuries to the secondary. So the game plan was, let's attack the injured secondary with our top-end wide receivers and not just run Zeke into a brick wall of a defense.
Did you know that 9 underdogs won this week, and that's the first time ever that's ever happened? I thought that was crazy to think. I think most of the teams that should have won and should have ended up winning, the Cowboys played well. Zeke's going to end up being fine, so I totally agree with that. And then I guess for my reaction, I also said that the Packers will be fine. They play Detroit on Monday Night Football. However, unless Rodgers is really trying to tank the season and really show the Green Bay Packers that he doesn't want to play for them, maybe he might suck throughout the entire season. I think he had like 2.34 fantasy points, which is just absolutely god awful.
Don't disrespect him. He was at like 3.8, but
it was pretty bad.
So,
I think his interception rate, it was like so bad. I think his first 3 snaps of the year was like 2 interceptions. He's never done that his entire career. So I think he'll be fine. But I mean, he plays the Lions on Monday, and he should be rolled.
That's a remedy for our bounce back.
Yeah, to go off of that, Brian, you see, he kind of looks like a bum right now. You know what I mean?
He looks like
he hasn't showered all off season. He's got super long hair. He's unshaven. He just looks like he doesn't care. So I don't know.
It's Hobo Rodgers.
Which is funny because he didn't look like that in the Capital One match when he was playing with Brady out in Montana. He looked like regular Aaron Rodgers, and now he just looks like a total bum.
That's the truth. And also my other reactions to that was Kyle Shanahan makes me question reality. We'll get more into that. I don't want to go about it because I'm just so pissed off at Kyle Shanahan. And then Stafford overdid expectations, like I called it.
Oh, Stafford crushed it.
Let it happen again. They're going to go 2-0. Might go to the Super Bowl. I mean, probably the Bucs Chiefs again, but the Rams look really good.
My favorite stat about the Packers game was that if a quarterback threw the ball into the ground every single play, they would have had a better QBR than Aaron Rodgers had that game.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's bad.
All right, John, you got a point that we all agree with. So please let the world know what you have to say.
Yeah, the Falcons are bad. The Falcons suck. And it's finally that time where the Falcons, they'd have some fantasy points, but no. The Falcons are absolutely terrible. It's time to panic on them. If you drafted Mike Davis, I'm sorry. You're screwed. You're absolutely screwed. He's the worst RB2 in the league.
Yeah, but he also led the team with fantasy points, Mike Davis.
Yeah, I know. What did he have, like 7 points or something? But anyways, the dude's never going to get into the end zone. They played the Eagles, who have a dreadful defense, and still only put up 6 points. They had their first 2 drives were good, and then I don't even think they made it to the red zone the rest of the game. It was absolutely terrible. My next point is on the Titans. I wouldn't panic on them. They had a terrible game against the Cardinals. I mean, Tannehill got sacked 5 times by Chandler Jones alone. I like to think it's an anomaly, so don't panic on them. And then kind of going off of that, the Cardinals are for real.
Oh, they look good.
Oh, they look so good.
Kyler Murray's going to win MVP. Like, after watching that first Hopkins touchdown, I was like, yeah, Kyler really might win MVP this season.
Yep. And we'll kind of go into it later in the pod, but no, they're for real.
So one thing that's fun to do, we have a lot of guys we talked about throughout this past offseason getting ready for fantasy, there were a bunch of guys we didn't like. So we made a devil's advocate fantasy team for our podcast league, and we're going to compare how all three of us did against this team throughout the season. So this team consists of Tua at quarterback, wide receiver one, Mike Evans, wide receiver two, Jamar Chase. Running backs are Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. Our flex pick is Dallas Goedert, and right now in our flex is Miles Sanders. Then we've also got a bench of Kenny Galladay, Juju Smith-Schuster, Will Fuller, James Conner, and Melvin Gordon 3. So we're really just going to arrange this lineup throughout the season with Trevor as the best projections. But for week one, this combination put up 84.7 points. And the three of us, I just barely beat it with 86.9 because I had an off week with some of my guys. John, you crushed this team scoring 100
Oh, I
points.
wiped the floor with the devil's advocate team.
But Bryan, you just had a few setbacks for week one, and you unfortunately took the first L to the devil's advocate team.
Did I put up 78? I thought I put up more than that.
Well, this is not including your kicker and your defense.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah, my team had a rough week anyway, so I'm not too upset about it.
Well, it's because
At least I got 1 win out of 3 leagues. That's all
your main guy was Devontae Adams, and he just had a terrible week.
I mean, it's Monday Night Football. Devontae Adams scoring 35. Just let it happen. Keenan Allen, Herbert, Eckler, and I think I have Antonio Gibson too. They're all gonna go off this week. I'm ready for it.
Oh, I can't wait for a lot of these guys. But one of the biggest controversial picks, or one of the picks that everyone got upset about that we saw in our league, is that Stephon Diggs went 9th overall, taken as a wide receiver 3 off the board, which is weird to get upset about because that's where he was ranked. I think if people got upset because he took this manager, took him over Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, Travis Kelce, and took him over DeAndre Hopkins, who he took in the second round. But how do you guys feel about this individual reaching for Stephon Diggs in the first round?
Who did it? Who reached for Stephon?
Yeah,
it was the original clown himself, Matt Katsunas.
Yes, Gatsy.
I don't think it's. I mean, it's not good considering he left so many. He left Kelce on the board. He left Eckler on the board. He left Hopkins on the board. And he left. I mean, Aaron Jones, I might now say that Stephon Diggs is worthy of picking over him. But that's just a little bit too early when this draft was so focused around running backs that if you didn't take a running back in the first or second round, you were kind of screwed. And I think Gatsy, having Gus Edwards go down, his running backs are looking real tough right now. So he's probably regretting the Stephon Diggs pick. But overall, I mean, he's still going to be a top 5 receiver probably. I mean, Josh Allen didn't look too great, but he'll probably bounce back this week.
Yeah, there's not a ton of receivers in the league that get 14 targets a week.
Yeah, because here's the thing, like Stephon Diggs last year had 166 targets, most out of the top 10, had 127 catches, most out of the top 10, 1,500 yards, most out of the top 10. He just didn't get the touchdowns. He literally had half as many touchdowns as Tyreek and Adams, so that's only like the one drawback. If that number decides to have some positive regression this year, then Stephon Diggs is definitely worth a first-round pick. But it's going to be one of those things where you have to wait to see what really plays out throughout the season. And now it's just time to get into some impactful news, guys. So Ryan Fitzpatrick is done for 6 to 8 weeks. And I think it's an injury where I'm just kind of like worried about the football team offense at the moment. Do you guys agree with that? I don't see the giant upside.
Taylor Heinicke went duels against Tom Brady in the playoffs last year. He looked good then. He looked good when he came in the game. I believe in him.
I don't think if you drafted anyone on the football team, it was because of Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? Like you might be excited about how he's kind of a gunslinger or whatever, but I don't think it changes things too much.
I mean, Terry McLaurin was a beast last year and he was QB proof. So why is he not considered going to be good this year? I mean, Antonio Gibson, same thing. His quarterback sucked. I mean, he still balled out at the end of the season. I don't think Ryan Fitzpatrick makes a huge difference in this offense. And honestly, if Cam Newton does come to the Redskins, it could be a bonus for them.
It could. I think the only thing it really does is that it limits the top 5 potential that people had for Terry McLaurin because Fitzmagic does hyper target his number 1 wide receiver. But I actually did go back to just look at the box score real quick of that Buccaneers Washington football team game from the playoffs. We still did see Heinicke hyper target the receivers. In that game was Cam Sims because he was probably more open than why am I blanking on his name? McLaurin was. But McLaurin still had 7 to 9 targets in that game, so it's not something I'm super concerned about. It's just kind of like the potential top 5 breakout of Terry McLaurin is probably a lot less likely now with Ryan Fitzpatrick sidelined.
The one stat I do like is that Antonio Gibson outtouched J.D. McKissick 20-1 last week.
Oh,
Which
that made me so happy, but also really sad because I only have him in like a few leagues. Where if I would had him in multiple leagues, like if this was last year, I would just be rubbing it in everyone's faces. But now it's a new year.
he's just going to be a beast this season. Just wait for him. As it trickles along around the season, he's going to be a top 5 back. Just watch it.
All right. Also, next up on the list is Raheem Mostert. So we saw him leave the game. Reports was like he would go back in if they needed him. Then it came out, so his knees hurt. Oh, he's out for 8 weeks. Now he's having season-ending surgery on his leg. So in literally a matter of hours, he went from, you might get this guy back in a little bit, to he's now done for the season.
I mean, again, I don't like the
Are we
49ers.
surprised?
So. Apparently, JaMychal Hasty is better than Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon had a great preseason. He was a top back coming out of Ohio State. All good things said about him, but now apparently JaMychal Hasty's ahead of him in the depth chart. So I don't even trust the 49ers anymore. I mean, I'm just done with them.
It's kind of just like now it's like you were stuck because you invested high in capital to pick Trey Sermon in fantasy draft. So it's just like, what do you do now? Like you have to keep him on your bench.
I still think he's going to end up being pretty good. I think that Mitchell probably will be the lead back, but once they realize JaMychal Hasty is not that good and Trey Sermon actually has a lot of talent, Kyle Shanahan will come to life and he'll actually end up playing him at least a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to drop Trey Sermon now up there week 1, healthy scratch, but I mean, it's they'll come to realization that he's actually good at football and they'll start giving him carries. It's just a matter of one.
Also, in other injury news, we saw Jerry Jeudy unfortunately get carted off in what looked like a horrific injury, but reports are it's just a super high ankle sprain, out 4 to 6 weeks. So now we just need to look at who's going to be stepping into his spot after he had such a fantastic start to the season. It's just super disappointing that we're not going to see it get to play out with the second season breakout for Jeudy.
2 words. Noah Fant.
You on the Noah Fant train?
I got that in my highlights, actually. It could be Noah Fant's breakout season. I saw good things from him, and Teddy Bridgewater kind of balled out. So I didn't believe in Noah Fant at first, but I'm starting to believe a little bit now.
He's been on the come up for the last few years, and he's huge. I mean, just look at the guy. I mean, Cortland Sutton will definitely benefit from this as well. But I mean, I'm a Jerry Jeudy owner in one of my leagues, and that definitely hurts. I had high hopes for him, but hey, 6 weeks from now, we'll throw him back in the lineup.
Yeah, I think the quiet night from Sutton came back to do with them just slowly working him back to NFL game speed. And the one like good defensive player on the Giants did seem to be shadowing Cortland Sutton more. I'm talking about James Bradbury instead of Jerry Jeudy. So that's kind of just why Cortland Sutton probably had a super quiet day. Sutton will come back in. He'll probably take more of the reps that Jeudy was seeing. And then you got guys like Tim Patrick who are just out there. They're going to catch balls. You might not pick them up. They're going to be sitting on waiver wire for guys who don't know about them, but could be a decent pickup this week.
Yeah, he'll score a touchdown in like 80 yards, and then you'll look him on the waiver wire like, should I pick him up? You probably shouldn't. But
maybe he catches a 53-yard pass at the end of the game and you lose because of it. That too.
Yeah, haunting your
memories. You sound like you're speaking from experience.
I am. Your little brother did it to me.
Yeah. Why does Andrew he keeps destroying me and Bryan randomly in weeks? Now this back-to-back years where Andrew has just obliterated me in week 1.
Tim Patrick, I lost by like 2 points to him. It's all because Tim Patrick caught a 53-yard catch literally to end the game. It wouldn't mean nothing. So I guess he just got my number.
So
don't mess with the little Rums.
Yeah, he's out to get us. So just a few key defensive injuries. I know typically defensive injuries don't have a huge impact on fantasy, but especially for guys that are guarding the wide receivers, like the top corners, losing these guys will make bad defenses even worse. So the Saints, even though they had a great week 1, they now have Marshawn Lattimore, who's their shutdown corner week to week now with a thumb injury. Lions placed their first round pick, cornerback Jeff Okudah, on IR after he just ruptured his Achilles. And 49ers, the guy holding their secondary together, Jason Verrett, is also out for the season again in his career. So these are three teams that struggled. Well, these two of these teams struggled defensively, and they're only going to struggle more going forward with these guys out on their team.
It's just another reason why you're gonna see the Packers bounce back in a big way this week. Like the Lions are already bad on defense, and now they have what is a big hit. You'll see it happen this week.
Now to move on to something that we all look forward to, something one of the biggest factors in fantasy football, the waiver wire guys that we should be looking at going into this week. So we're going to be starting off with our wide receivers. My pick for this week is Christian Kirk. Now, I don't think Christian Kirk is going to be a season-long guy. I mean, he could be. He could also be a week one superstar that kind of fades into the distance. But with the next two matchup, the Cardinals have the Vikings, who just got torched by the Bengals, and then they have the Jaguars, who just got torched by the Texans. Christian Kirk is definitely not the 1A option on their team. He may not even be the 1B option on his team, but with how heavy of a passing attack the Cardinals will have, Christian Kirk could easily catch a touchdown in each of the games coming up.
Yeah, and my pick was, I don't feel great about it. I mean, he is on my favorite team, the Patriots, but Nelson Aguilar. I mean, we saw good things from Nelson Aguilar. He came in this offseason. I mean, there was a meme around him that said he couldn't catch balls, but that wasn't the case in week one. He absolutely balled out for the Patriots. Mac Jones actually looks pretty good. I mean, we just got to fix a few, holes here and there. Mac Jones will be ready to roll through the season. And if Nelson Aguilar could be his go-to guy along with, Jacoby Myers, I think you could probably expect some good things out of him.
All right, my pick was Cole Beasley. How many receptions do you think, or how many targets do you think Cole Beasley had?
Didn't he have like 100 in this past game? It felt like a million
I'm
watching
pretty
the
sure it was
highlights.
triple digits. No,
Yeah.
Brian, do you have a guess? Do you know?
I'll go with 13.
Yeah, 13 on the dot. The man had 13 targets as the wide receiver 2 in this offense. And as we had talked about before, Stephon Diggs had 14. The Bills just throw the ball a ridiculous amount, whether they're up, down. Brian, you said this last week, and I couldn't agree more. Anybody that is a pass catcher in this offense is basically anybody that's not Zach Moss or Devin Singletary is a guy to own. So
I started Cole Beasley last year in 2 playoff games, and he won me 2 playoff games. He played the Cardinals twice, and he dropped 30 fantasy points both games. He gets high volume. I mean, Stephon Diggs definitely gets his targets, but Cole Beasley is slept on every single year in fantasy football. And if you play PPR or half PPR, he's a guy to get on a waiver wire.
Congrats, Jana.
Yeah, I actually picked up Cole Beasley in a couple of my leagues as well, just because I mean I believe in him. After watching this past game, I'm a huge believer.
And game script is not a thing for the Buffalo Bills. They could be up 30 and they will still pass the ball. So I agree.
They're just mean in that aspect.
Yeah. Moving on to quick running backs, there's only a few guys to really pick up, and I'm going to leave the hotter topic for Brian because we can really get into that one. But I'm just going to throw this guy. We all saw him kind of unexpectedly go off as Mark Ingram for the Houston Texans. They at least show that Mark Ingram is the 1 and 2 down back. David Johnson is the 3rd down back, but Mark Ingram had 26 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. They were playing the Jaguars, who gave him amazing field possession with turnovers. I don't see Mark Ingram being a solid RB2 rest of season, but if your team is desperate for running back help, if you only have 2 running backs and you want that emergency 3rd running back, he's a guy you kind of want to be targeting on waivers or spending some part of your budget of fab on just to make sure you have an emergency option if one of your 2 options does go down.
And now the big topic, the main free agent that everyone's going to be scurrying to get is Elijah Mitchell. He is apparently the starting running back for the 49ers. Mostert must start is now down for the season. Trey Sermon apparently is not ready to play football. One of the best backs in college football last year apparently is not good enough. JaMychal Hasty is the backup. So people are scurrying to get Elijah Mitchell this week. He did ball out though. He had 19 carries, over 100 yards, and a touchdown. I think he averaged like 5.5 yards a carry. So I'm going to be looking to pick him up in my leagues. I know that probably everyone else in all my leagues are going to be looking to pick him up. But for now, as a 49ers starting running back, Elijah Mitchell probably will be starting. And he could be the Jeff Wilson of last year and all these other 49ers running backs that come in year after year in Kyle Shanahan's running offense.
So like here's like the biggest thing, whereas if it was Elijah Mitchell rest of year at RB1, people would be dropping an insane amount of fab to get him right now, which honestly some people might if they don't take into a few other considerations that you have to think about when it comes to this rushing game. what we did, like what a bunch of news outlets didn't get to talk about today because it came out late, is that on Johnson just signed to the practice squad. You also have Jeff Wilson, who will be coming off the PUP after their bye in week 8. So it's really, if you're dumping money into Mitchell, realistically, maybe he's the starter for another 5 or 6 weeks, which could really help your team if you really need him in a pinch. But you have to just be prepared for the magic games that Shanahan likes to play with this running back rotation.
Year after year, the 49ers always have their starting running back. It's always Mostert. He always gets hurt. And then there's always a guy in between that goes out throughout the regular season. And last year it was Jeff Wilson in the playoffs, dropped 30 points in 2 back-to-back fantasy games. It's more likely than not it's going to happen. And my belief is that Trey Sermon at the end of the year is going to be the Jeff Wilson of last year. However, with Kerryon Johnson, all these other ads that they're having, I don't see him having an amazing season throughout the entire duration of the season. But if you want to put money on him and you're desperate for a running back, do it.
All right,
Let me tell you a story. Sorry, I don't want to harp on this topic too much, but Brian, do you remember a few years ago when I had started Alfred Morris and I needed, I believe it was 4 fantasy points on Monday night to win a football game? And the dude got 1 carry.
I do remember that, actually.
The dude got 1 carry.
It's Alfred Morris. Come on.
Trust Kyle Shanahan or anybody on the Niners ever again. That was the most painful day of my life. But anyways, all right, let's jump to my pick here. Kind of unconventional here. I went with Cordarrelle Patterson on the Atlanta Falcons. I had mentioned earlier Mike Davis is the starting running back. I don't love Mike Davis, even though I drafted him on one of my fantasy teams. The Falcons are playing against the Bucks.
Buccaneers. Oh my God.
Yeah. So they're going to get murdered, as we all know, and they're going to be down early. So Mike Davis isn't going to be running the ball too much. Cordarrelle Patterson is going to come in as the RB2, and he'll catch a lot of passes because they're going to be down, and Matt Ryan's going to be getting killed all day, so he's going to need to dump it off. In PPR leagues, he could get, your 5 to 6 receptions, 30, 40 yards receiving, plus say 20 yards rushing. He could be a sneaky good play this week.
I love the logic of that the Falcons will be game scripted to be able to put in their backups and pass or run the ball or whatever they may do. But I think the Falcons are so bad that even if they're down by a lot of points, they're still not going to end up doing anything.
It's kind of like how we view the Lions, but worse for some reason. Like they're really worse than the Lions.
I mean, I like the idea, though. I like that he's a dual threat runner and he can receive the ball too, and you can put him in our back, which is pretty cool.
Okay, yeah. So most importantly, I feel like for all of our wide receivers, like if you're really trying to budget or just like spend it on, it's like you're not really spending, you're not like paying the house up. You're paying like maybe 5 to 10% on these guys of your fab budget. For Mark Ingram, I personally would probably spend like between 5 and 10% because I know what the really situation for Mark Ingram is rest of season. Elijah Mitchell, it's kind of like one of those things where I don't know. It's going to vary because like if I knew he's going to be running back 1 for the San Francisco 49ers rest of year, you could dump 50% of your budget on him. But with all these unknown factors, maybe you would dump 30. But now it's just like, okay, does Trey Sermon take over at some point? Does Jeff Wilson muck it up when he comes back? Does Kerryon Johnson for some reason have an impact? So it's like, I feel like I'm between like 10 to 15% of my budget or whatever budget someone might have to throw at him. So I feel like there's too many unknown factors to really dump a significant portion of your fab on him.
Agreed.
So give me some numbers. Like, what do you guys think would be reasonable for Elijah Mitchell? Like, what's your range you see happening with him?
I mean, I feel like people who don't really play fab might throw a little bit more than they think they should, but probably somewhere between the 10 to 15 range, I'd say, just because of the unknown factor that he might not even be the starter come week 3 because Kyle Shanahan's all over the place.
Yeah. As much as we want to overreact week 1, you shouldn't. So if you have 100 fab points, you can't spend more than 10 in week 1 on
I'm gonna promise you he's not the James Robinson of last season, and if he is, then we can come back to this episode and say, Brian, you're stupid. But okay. I don't think so.
We'll put you on the spot come week. I think the biggest deciding week will be let's say he's the main guy for the next few weeks. Like once other guys start to come back, now we get to see like, okay, is this actually gonna be legit or not? But
yeah, I agree.
Boys, grab your paddles. get in your canoe. We're heading towards the stream. We're talking about streamers of the week. So we're going to start off with a fun one, quarterback. My pick was Jameis Winston. We saw him light up the Packers. He literally threw what I think 14 times and had 5 touchdowns. Now the Packers just basically fell over and just let him do whatever he wanted to. The Panthers really aren't much better for defense. I don't see Jameis Winston throwing up 30 points again this week, but I could easily see him in the 20 to 25 range versus Carolina.
My pick was going to be Jameis Winston, but you took Jameis Winston, so I had to go with Baker Mayfield against Houston. I still think, Houston, first of all, looks good. They look great. Jacksonville is worse than Houston, but Houston's either way. Houston's they're a tricky football team, but their defense is still awful. I think Baker Mayfield will probably come out this game passing a lot. I think they have all the weapons in the world to be able to do it. I don't normally love Baker Mayfield as a fantasy quarterback, but I do think that he could probably get you somewhere between like 18 to like 22 this week if you need a quarterback.
They love running the ball in Cleveland, but it could also just be like maybe it's a swing pass to the running back or just something where it's technically a touchdown for Baker and he walks away with more points than you imagined him being versus a terrible defense. I think it's just we saw the Houston versus Jacksonville game was the toilet bowl and the Texans came out on top.
It was tough to see if the Texans are actually good or not because I think that Urban Myers really wasn't ready for a NFL coaching job. So I think Jacksonville's just that bad, but Houston's also bad, but Houston's just better than Jacksonville. It's a very tricky situation to look at. Either way, Baker against Houston, they're probably going to end up winning the game by like 30. So start him if you want to.
Next up, I went with Teddy Bridgewater, and I know you're going to say he lost Jerry Jeudy for the next few weeks. They played against a terrible defense, which is the Giants' defense, which is both true. But good news for Teddy Bridgewater is they're playing Jacksonville next week, so it's another.
Which is worse than Houston.
Yep. So Bridgewater put up 20.4 points last week. He threw 36 times, 264 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's a pretty good game. And then after that, they're actually playing the Jets. So if you want to pick up Teddy Bridgewater for the next 2 weeks and stream him, say if you have Aaron Rodgers and you hate him, I say go for it.
And one of the harder parts about the stream, it's something that everyone is always on the search for, is the tight end at the end of the list, the one that got week to week that could bring you a champion, could fall into the end zone with a touchdown. So my pick is Jared Cook, tight end for the Los Angeles Chargers. And I know a lot of the big debate is between him and the other tight end right now, but the thing is they're playing the Cowboys. Is it going to be a high scoring game? If Mike Williams is covered, if Keenan Allen is covered, Jared Allen can easily catch a seam route for a touchdown like he always would do with Drew Brees. He's definitely someone you could throw in a spot start, and he could walk away with 5 points. You could walk away with 12 points, depending on if he gets that touchdown or not.
Yeah, my pick is Gerald Everett. If the Titans defense looks the same way that it did last weekend and they play the same way against Seattle, I could see the Titans Seahawks potentially being a 60 to 65 point game because both defenses aren't great. However, Gerald Everett did catch a touchdown. He only caught 2 passes in the first week, but I think they're just trying to slowly work him into the offense. He's fast. He's quick. He's like a receiving tight end. He was pretty good on the Rams. I would probably expect him to at least catch a touchdown this game coming up.
So let me just add in this little thing. So the passing offense now for the Seahawks, the offensive coordinator was the tight ends coach for the Rams. And so Gerald Everett is actually the most familiar with the offense that they're running. I just think the game plan was the defense is going to cover DK Metcalf. So Tyler Lockett was just wide open the entire game. I think that the Titans, if let's say the Titans decide, let's focus on Lockett and DK, Gerald Everett could easily be the third option on the team. He usually catch a few balls. We know that Russell Wilson loves throwing to his tight ends. So Gerald Everett could have a positive game versus a terrible Titans defense.
I agree with that.
My pick was Juwan Johnson, wide receiver / tight end on the New Orleans Saints. The man he caught 3 passes. I know, only 3 passes, but 2 of them were touchdowns and for 21 yards. Anytime a tight end catches 2 touchdowns in a game, he's an automatic pickup because that's how tight ends score these days. I mean, the only tight ends that get 100 yards receiving are like, Kelsey and Waller. So if you can get a guy that is an end zone target and a real end zone threat, you got to pick them up. And so they're playing Carolina next week. Not the best defense in the world. And I'm a believer in Jameis Winston. I think he's gonna play well again this week. So it's I think he's a good pickup.
Fun fact: Juwan Johnson's a famous TikToker before he even played a snap in the NFL.
Really?
Little fun fact. He's got millions of followers on TikTok. Kind of fun.
I might drop him a follow.
It's with him and his wife. So his wife also posts. So I don't know if you want to follow it, but I mean, go ahead. It's pretty cool though to see that he blew up on TikTok and now he caught 2 touchdowns in his first game and everyone's got a support behind his back. So
hey, as long as he's not TikToking on logos, I'm cool with it.
Yeah,
no juju and
just don't dance on the logo of teams or you're gonna get your head taken off when you're not ready for it.
Yep, that's the rule.
Because defenses do not like when you mock them at their home stadium. So we're going to be talking about some defensive streamers right now. So my pick is the Giants versus the Washington football team. Now, I'm not happy playing the Giants defense after what the Broncos just did to them. But the thing is, the Washington football team has a short week. Taylor Heineke is trying to replace Ryan Fitzmagic. He didn't get any first team reps. This could be a very low scoring game. Unfortunately, this will be a sad game to watch for the opening of week 2. We could see a few defensive scores, a few sacks, maybe an interception or 2 with a not ready Heineke for game 1 action. So it could be a situation where it's just a grudge match and your defense walks away with 6 to 8 points. Maybe they get a free touchdown.
And I'm going to go with the team that actually had the worst defensive fantasy game last week with Green Bay solely because they're playing Detroit. I think Detroit got lucky last week with game scripts. I mean, the 49ers were up, I believe, 38-10 at one point, and they just let them come back in the game. However, I feel like Green Bay at home is going to play a much better game this week. I think Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams come back. I think the defense steps up at home. I'd expect them to probably get between 6 and 8. Could be a defensive touchdown. You never know. But anytime a team plays Detroit, Houston, Jacksonville, you kind of have to start them.
And I picked Arizona. Why? Because listen to the stat line. They embarrassed Tennessee last week. So
Chandler Jones stat line?
Sorry?
Chandler Jones stat line? That's another one.
Yep. So, defense as a whole, it was 13 points against, 6 sacks, 1 pick, 2 fumble recoveries, and then 5 of those sacks were Chandler Jones alone. And they were on the road against Tennessee, a pretty good football team with an offense that at its best is nothing short of scary. So now they're coming back home, playing against Minnesota. Minnesota coming off a loss against the Bengals, where, let's be honest, they put up points, but they didn't play that great. I think Arizona,
Mike Zimmer did not fix that defense like everyone thought he was. This is not a good look for Minnesota right now.
It's not a good look at all. But yeah, Arizona coming home. They're going to be with their home crowd. Look for them to have another good game.
You know who Arizona plays the week after?
Jackson.
Yeah, this could be a 2-week pickup.
Could be.
It could be.
All right, now for the other part of the segment that a lot of people just want to listen to because they want to hear that their guys are going to do well. We're going to get into the week 2 matchups. And I'm going to be starting this off, handing it to Brian, talking about our Thursday night game, the Giants versus the Washington football team. Brian, fill us in.
The Giants and the football team, not a great Thursday night game. We had a great Thursday night game in week 1 with the Cowboys and the Bucks. This one is slightly a little bit different. We have no Ryan Fitzpatrick. Taylor Heineke's coming in for the football team. And the Giants look pretty awful as well. Saquon Barkley's coming off that injury. The only really good player I saw last week was maybe Sterling Shepard, which, I mean, I'll give him props where it is. But to look at this game, I think that Antonio Gibson had a solid, he had an okay game in the first week. However, he did get 20 carries, so I did love that about him. But more importantly, I do think that this game is going to be more of a battle of the defenses. I don't think either quarterback is elite. I think both defenses are pretty solid. So I'm favoring the home team in this situation. I think the Redskins probably win or the football team, my bad, either by 3 points or even less than that, honestly, because I think it's going to be a really close game. It's going to be probably low scoring. And it's going to be an interesting Thursday night football game. The Giants could win very much, but I'm going to lean towards the football team in this one.
Good to know. So the next game that we have on our list is the Bears versus Bengals. the battle of the animals. Right now, the score projection is 45 points, with Chicago being favored by 3. Here's what I got to say about the Bengals. Burrow showed that he will target his number one guy that he liked in college, number one in his team. Jamar Chase saw the most targets, and surprisingly, he's not dropping the ball anymore, apparently. T. Higgins also had a good week 1, definitely the number 2 in this passing game. Both wide receivers were definitely solid wide receiver 2s. I think Jamar Chase has wide receiver 1 upside with the way Burrow is going to be targeting him. And then, guys, the team fed Joe Mixon, and Joe Mixon did not disappoint. Had over 100 yards on 33 attempts. It was a beautiful thing to see. Hopefully, the Bengals can keep this going. On the Bears side of things, the only silver lining of their beatdown from Sunday night was that David Montgomery looked to be like the only legit part of this offense at the moment. Going up against the Rams, number 1 defense last year, David Montgomery plowed his way through for 18 fantasy points, including a touchdown. I definitely see Matt Nagy throwing in Fields a little bit more and throwing them into various packages as they get ready to transition to the better quarterback. Robinson will hopefully bounce back instead of having only short routes like he did against the Rams. Hopefully he gets some deeper targets and Andy Dalton isn't playing a dink and dunk kind of offense just because of game script. So I feel like my situation they should be aware of is that the Bears may bring pressure on Burrow because I don't think Burrow played a hard defense this past week. So we could see Burrow a little bit more rush with Khalil Mack in his face versus a bad offensive line. So we're going to see the actual movement of Burrow a little bit more in this week. Maybe they don't have an elite passing game because he's trying to get the ball out sooner. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Bengals offense does playing a much better defense in week 2.
All right, so I drew the Texans versus the Browns. Over under 48 points, Cleveland minus 12.5. I had the Browns winning 34-20. So beating the spread. Things to look out for as far as players this week. Nick Chubb is going to take full advantage of the terrible Texans defense. The Browns nearly beat KC last week, arguably the best team in the league. Watch Nick Chubb and even Kareem Hunt. They're gonna be getting a lot of carries and getting a lot of yardage as well. Mark Ingram, he had a great game last week. They also beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they're pretty terrible with a rookie quarterback. I think Mark Ingram is going to get a lot of touches because he seems to be the clear RB1, but I don't think he's going to do nearly as well as last week. So I would shy away from starting him. And because I think the Texans will be down early. Brandon Cooks will get a lot of targets just as he did last week. So yeah, situation to be aware of. I see the Browns going up early and moving the chains with the run. They won't need to throw too often. Jarvis Landry might not be the best start. So I would start him with caution.
So my one thing with the Houston offense is, okay, maybe they have a lot of pass attempts, but last week they played the Jaguars. This week, I think that you're going to see a lot of Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett sandwiches with Tyrod Taylor in the middle. I don't think he's going to be able to sit back and throw the ball down the field to Brandon Cooks. I think it's going to be a lot of very rushed short passes. So Brandon Cooks might have a lot of targets. I don't see him having a big game like he did last week at all.
I agree with that completely. I mean, the Browns defense, they got a good defense, so probably expect good things from the Browns. They could win by like 21. You never know. But next up on the weekly matchups is the Rams versus the Colts. The game projection or the over-under is at 47.5, and the Rams are -4 for the spread. I personally think that the Rams are going to win 38-28. I think they're going to crush the spread this week. Last week we saw that Stafford is still elite. He still can sling the ball. I mean, the air yards were just absolutely insane. Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods are both studs. And then who else was it? Van Jefferson as well, also had a touchdown. I think big things for the Rams are coming this week. However, the Colts do have a good defense, so you do have to be aware of that. It hurts me to say this, but Jonathan Taylor did look pretty good in week 1. I hate to say it, but Nyheim Hines also did look good too. So I think that 50-50 split is still going to make Jonathan Taylor not valued as that RB1 that everyone thought they could take in a fantasy draft. Berkey?
Okay, so I just want to say, so I know it's hard to admit being a Seattle Seahawks fan, but our defense isn't good anymore. The Colts have a really good offensive line. Jonathan Taylor's a good power back, but I see Jonathan Taylor just falling on his face fantasy wise versus this Rams front. I know we saw David Montgomery punch through it last week, but I don't see it this week because I feel like you still have to
I,
respect some of the Bears wide receivers. You don't have to respect the Colts wide receivers. So you're going to see more stacked boxes against the Colts.
exactly. And I think that, again, the Rams with Aaron Donald and the rest of that defensive line and the linebackers there, John Taylor and Nyheim Hines are going to have a pretty rough fantasy day. So don't expect what it's going to be. That's going to be like the Seahawks again. I also had that Wentz needs to do more. I mean, Wentz didn't look particularly great against a pretty bad defense in the Seattle Seahawks. So if they want to be able to squeeze by a win for the Rams, they're going to have to rely heavily on either John Taylor or even the pass game because it did not look too pretty last week. So I'm expecting the Rams to rely on the pass game again with Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and Van Jefferson, and start the season 2-0.
Right now, going down to the Sunshine State of Florida, we got a matchup between the Bills and the Dolphins. The projection for this game is 47.5 points, the Bills being a 3-point favorite. So the Bills got punched in the face by the Pittsburgh Steelers last week, and it didn't look great. They looked rattled versus a very elite end defense. 50 passing attempts only resulting in 270 yards and 1 touchdown is not what you want to see from Josh Allen. He suffered for some missed throws. He had a wide open touchdown. They just overthrew barely. Suffered from some drops from his wide receivers. The target share for Stephon Diggs is still there, so you're playing him with confidence. The target share for Beasley also makes Beasley a great wide receiver to flex play. We saw Zach Moss did not play, saw Singletary with 16 opportunities, and was still just kind of miserable watching. So even if one of these guys has the full backfield, don't start them. On the Dolphins side of things, the Dolphins started strong. It looked like Myles Gaskin was going to be the guy, but then he only finished the game with 9 carries and 5 catches. Still the RB1 for that team, but did not look pretty. They had a very pedestrian passing game as a whole. Parker and Waddle were leading the targets. We got to see a fun touchdown from the rookie Waddle. Looks like he's going to have a promising start to the season, but now it's kind of like, what's the whole thing going to look like with Will Fuller coming into play? Because that was their big offseason acquisition. They went out and paid Will Fuller to come in and be the number 1 guy. Now we have to see, is he going to be taking snaps from Waddle? Is he going to be taking snaps from Parker? And my one situation to be aware of is that they still have Xavier Howard on defense. He's one of the most top-end elite corners. He'll most likely be shadowing Diggs. The last time Diggs played the Dolphins, the first week, he went bananas. He went 8 for 153 and 1. In their second matchup, he only went 7 for 76. So I still see Diggs having a good game. It's just the likelihood of that first matchup between the two. Maybe Howard wasn't shadowing him this game. I think Diggs, you're going to have to set your expectations a little lower than normally for Diggs, but he could still have a good game. Josh Allen will most likely be attacking the other parts of this Dolphins defense.
Bills should win that game, in my belief.
Yeah. Yep. And I feel strongly about this one. Patriots versus Jets. Over under 43 points. New England is favored by 5.5. I don't think it's going to be close. I don't think it's going to be close at all. I have 31-13 Patriots. Yeah, so it's the Jets played the Panthers last week. It was a pretty low-scoring affair. It was in 19-14, I believe, and the Patriots narrowly lost to the Dolphins last week. Players in this game, Damian Harris is in for a huge night. Look for him to get 25 carries and 100-plus yards. He had 100 yards last week in a loss. If my prediction proves correct, they're going to be up most of the game. He's going to get a ton of carries. They're going to control the clock. So I think he is one of the best RB2 plays you can have right in week 2.
Also, the New England defense could be a really good play too, because the Jets just lost their best offensive lineman. Once that happened in the middle of the Carolina game, that's when the Jets offense really fell apart.
Yeah, Zach Wilson was seeing a lot of pressure. And granted, I will say he fared pretty well given the pressure he was facing. But yeah, I think Belichick's defense is going to confuse him, and he's going to see a lot of pressure. Jameson Crowder was out last week for the Jets. He had COVID. I believe he's supposed to play this week, and if he does, the Jets are going to be throwing the ball a lot, and Crowder's traditionally a guy that gets a ton of targets. He's an underneath guy. So I would look for Zach Wilson to be feeding him the ball pretty consistently, a good wide receiver 3 play this week. And then, to John's point, Wilson will be seeing ghosts just like Darnold was a couple years ago.
It's a New England thing. It's that old stadium. They just get to you.
Yeah, we just got to say the prediction for Corey Davis is turning out to be pretty true with his stat line that he had last week.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a bad pick. I judged people for drafting him pretty highly, but you're right. He's the clear number 1 guy. Granted, but Jameson Crowder and Keelan Cole were both out last week. You got to remember that.
I think my favorite, just thinking back about Corey Davis, is he starts with this year 95 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think, was it last year he goosed in week 1? It's just like, oh, Corey Davis.
You never know what to expect from Corey Davis. Okay, well, on to the next matchup, 49ers versus the Eagles. I hate the Eagles. I hate Kyle Shanahan, so I don't like either team. However, the over-under for the game is 50. San Fran is projected to win by 3.5 points. I have the Niners winning this game, but honestly, after the whole Mike Shanahan thing, I think I'm going to end up going with the Eagles here in a close game. Jalen Hurts looked like the real deal last year. I said in a previous podcast that a quarterback in the last 3 seasons, the quarterback who's been drafted 7th or higher has ended up as a QB1. Everyone thought it was going to be Ryan Tannehill this year. I don't think it's going to be Ryan Tannehill this year. And I think that guy's going to end up being Jalen Hurts with 29 fantasy points to start the year. Granted, he did play the Falcons, but him and Devonta Smith looked to click. They look great on offense. I hated Miles Sanders too. However, he did look really good too. Kenneth Gainwell looked good. Eagles all around just looked like a great offense, and their defense was all right. I mean, they shut the Falcons down clearly. So expect good things from the Eagles. It's hard to say from, a Patriots fan, but I like what I'm seeing there. On the flip side, the 49ers, Mostert already got hurt. Elijah Mitchell is probably the next Adrian Peterson in the eyes of the fantasy world. Could be. We don't know yet. Still hate him for the Ayuk and Trey Sermon thing. However, the 49ers did click on offense last week. They looked good. Their defense did look good for the first 3 quarters of the game, and then they let Jared Goff come back and almost tie up the game in the last 4 minutes of the game. So it's going to be a close one. I'm going to go with the underdog here. I feel like Jalen Hurts is going to ball out again this week in a tough matchup. Can very much see the 49ers winning here, but I'm going to go with the Eagles for the sake.
So I just have one quick question to throw in for this. We saw Miles Sanders have a good week 1 versus the Falcons. Versus the way the 49ers defense is now, he could have a good week 2. Would you sell high on Miles Sanders for running back you could probably depend on more throughout the rest of the season?
I would probably exercise trade options for Miles Sanders, but honestly, he looked pretty good. I think that with Jalen Hurts in this offense, it only makes Miles Sanders better. And I think that Miles Sanders kind of struggled in the years before that just because he didn't really have a good quarterback to hold
That's
him
also
down.
a running quarterback makes a running back more valuable because it takes less pressure off the running back, but that does also mean you can get vultured with touchdowns. So it's a give and take sort of situation.
It's tough to say. I'm not a big Miles Sanders fan, but I know John is, so.
I no. I was just about to say I would sell high on him. You got to realize that they played the Falcons when they were up big the entire game. I mean, it's Miles Sanders is good, but you might be able to sell high for him at this point.
Yeah, especially if their rookie Kenneth Gainwell starts to get more and more reps because they drafted Gainwell because Miles Sanders can't catch the ball. So if they get into situations where it's very more of a passing script kind of game, I could easily see where it's like a 50-50 split or Gainwell's on the field more than you want him to be, and then you're just pounding sand as the Sanders owner.
Good one, Bert.
Thank you. That was an accident. That wasn't even on purpose. But what also wasn't an accident was the Raiders winning last night on Monday Night Football. But we got to talk about their matchup with the Steelers. Now, let me just tell you this. It's not going to go the same way for the Raiders versus the Steel Curtain. This game is a 47.5 projection with a Pittsburgh being a 5.5 point favorite. The Steelers defense looks legit after manhandling the Bills. The Raiders are a much worse offense than the Bills. Najee Harris will bounce back versus this Raiders defense. Only running back to see the field. So even though he only had 5 points, he had 100% of the snaps. Deontay Johnson led all the receivers and targets for the Steelers. He is Big Ben's favorite, so Ben will hyper target him. I don't know anyone on the Raiders that can cover any of the Steelers wide receivers, so I think it's going to be a very high-scoring game. On the Raiders side, One of my favorite things was seeing 19 targets from my guy, Darren Waller. Hyper targeted to at a point where it seemed predictable and the defense could figure it out. The Raiders offense seemed to stutter out of the gate, but once they started to actually spread the ball around a little bit more, you saw the offense really pick up. Our favorite guy, Ryan, Josh Jacobs, had a few nice plays. We saw a million passes to the fullback. Really didn't see anything from Braylon Edwards until the last 2 minutes. All I can really say about the Raiders is they have no regrets, if you know what I mean. Henry Ruggs did absolutely nothing in this game. He doesn't even look like a first round wide receiver. So I feel like the situation to be aware of is that the Steelers defense is going to limit what we saw from the Raiders offense this past week. If they double cover Waller all night, it's going to be a rough day for the Raiders.
I do have to say Josh Jacobs had 38 yards and 2 touchdowns, and both touchdowns came off of a one or like a 4-yard touchdown. So actually he did have one pretty good run, but the other one was a fluke. The guy went down with the one and he just ran it in. So I am still hated, but I still hate Josh Jacobs because he beat me in fantasy last week. But I mean, overall, he did have a good game for fantasy managers.
All right, John, take us to Carolina.
Carolina. So, all right, over under 44 points. New Orleans is favored by 3.5 with the Saints at Panthers. I think the Saints are going to beat the spread here, 26-19, because honestly, I was impressed with what they showed last week. I don't think a lot of it was the Packers just playing pretty poorly, but I mean, that wasn't even a game. They were just completely embarrassed. So takeaways for players. I mean, Marquez Callaway, he was drafted. He was on a lot of draft boards because he was, perceived as the number one receiver in that offense. And he had a very bad game. He had I think one catch last week.
Well, that is the one thing you do have to remember about bad defenses, but they have a good cornerback. Jaire Alexander typically shuts down the number one option for that team, and it looked like he just followed Callaway the entire game.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, the game was over by halftime. Jameis Winston threw for 140 yards. It's not time to quit on him. I think Marquez Callaway in a real game will show number one receiver on the Saints potential. So I would not shy away from starting him if you're a believer. Kamara will score 2 touchdowns. That's just what he does. And then I'm not even going to talk about Christian McCaffrey because, I mean, there's no need to.
There's no need.
No need to at all.
Christian McCaffrey finished as the running back one last week without scoring a touchdown. He did better than Joe Mixon. It's just
he's just ridiculous. His pass catching ability and all the catches he got. I don't know how many catches did he have last week? Like 10? I think it was actually more than 10. It was actually some absolutely insane.
Remember last year when Robbie Anderson would get 10 catches a game? Christian McCaffrey came back. He's like, all of those are now mine.
It's ridiculous. His over, if you're a betting person out there, if you're looking for Christian McCaffrey over unders in betting, I think he's usually at like 8.5, and he probably hits it every single week. He got 116 balls in one season. He is just a freak of nature.
Yep. So he ran 21 times for 98 yards and then caught 9 for 89.
It's crazy.
That is ridiculous numbers. And yeah, what if he scores 2 touchdowns? It's like
it's game over. You won.
Yeah, you won. That's why he went as the number one pick across every single draft board. But yeah, takeaways from this game overall for Saints at Panthers. The Saints just had a super weird game last week. It'll be interesting to see how it fares when they actually play a real game.
Now on to the Broncos versus the Jags. Probably one of the most depressing games this week to watch. The Broncos.
Unless you love defense, Brian.
Unless you love defense. But I mean, last week we saw that Jerry Jeudy went out with an ankle sprain. He had like 10.5 fantasy points in the first half. It hurts to see him leave, but he'll be back in 6 weeks, ready to go. Courtland Sutton was actually nowhere to be found, but like we talked about earlier, probably just trying to get adjusted back into the offense. Tim Patrick's out there too. Still hate that man. But the big thing here is that Noah Fant actually looked pretty good. I could see a breakout season of him. I wasn't very high on him to start the season. I drafted him in 2 of my leagues. So I'm thinking big things out of Noah Fant. between the running back core for the Broncos, Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, they split 50-50. However, Melvin Gordon did run for a 70-yard run last week, which will probably keep him as an RB1 there. And then the Jacksonville Jaguars are just atrocious. Urban Myers is not ready to be a coach. James Robinson was out-touched by Carlos Hyde last week. I think it was like 9-3 in carries. Trevor Lawrence lost his first loss ever in regular season since high school. So I'm probably seeing the Broncos defense shutting down the Jaguars again this week. It's a tough matchup for James Robinson fantasy owners. It's a tough matchup for Trevor Lawrence, who are trying to bounce back from an ugly week 1 loss. So Broncos 21, Jaguars -5.
Any thoughts on the juniors, Bryan?
I mean, you're talking about which juniors?
I'm talking about the juniors, Marvin Jones Jr., Laviska Shenault Jr., and DJ Chark Jr.
Laviska Shenault did look good. He's living up to expectation. I'll do have to give it that. DJ Chark did catch a crazy touchdown towards the end of the game there. Marvin Jones actually didn't play that bad either. I mean, Trevor Lawrence threw for 335 yards or something like that. He had a lot of passing attempts. He threw the ball a lot. However, I think they passed the ball. I think they had like 52 pass attempts. They just need to get James Robinson more involved, because clearly if you pass the ball that much, Houston Texans are going to end up beating you, and it pretty much showed in the week 1 right there.
All right, now going all the way out to the desert, Vikings versus Arizona. We're looking forward to this matchup. It has a high over-under at 51 points. Arizona's 4.5-point favorites. What you got to know about the Vikings, they're going to give the ball to Dalvin Cook 20-plus times. He saw 27 opportunities last week. Business as usual. We all saw Thielen having an amazing game last week just because he was so undervalued in drafts, because everyone wants the new hotness in Justin Jefferson. My big one thing is with Adam Thielen is he was only a top 10 wide receiver because he was heavily targeted in the end zone, which he still is. It's like they get down to the end zone and Kirk Cousins only sees Adam Thielen. Justin Jefferson will most likely have the better year overall, but Adam Thielen will have these games where he just catches everything because the defense forgets about him. On the Cardinals side, Kyler Murray is going to light up this team. If Burrow can do it, Kyler can definitely do it. We saw Hopkins eat in week 1. Hopkins is going to eat the defense again. We could see a decent game for Chase Edmonds coming up with just how much of the passing game he's involved in. Obviously, Christian Kirk score. Maybe AJ Green doesn't look like he's 1,000 years old. Also, one thing to note is maybe Moore gets more involved on the 14 routes he ran. He was targeted 5 times. So I could see Moore end up taking over AJ Green's role as the season goes on. That'll be something to monitor. But as you mentioned earlier, Bryan, the situation to be aware of is that the Cardinals defense is going to disrupt Kirk Cousins. We saw what they did to Tannehill and Henry. There's a potential for them to totally disrupt Kirk Cousins and Cook a little bit.
Cowboys, Chargers, Johnny Rumney.
Take us out to LA, bud.
Take us out to sunny California. All right, so over under for this game is 55 points. It's Vegas predicts a shootout, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I have 33-31 Chargers for a final. You want any piece of this fantasy game that you could, or this game you could possibly get. Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Zeke, Herbert, Dak Prescott, literally anyone. Pick your poison, because sweet God, there's going to be so many fantasy points to go around this game. It's going to be a shootout. Neither team has a great defense, and both offenses are high powered, and they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. One thing to be aware of, though, is Eckler did not catch a single pass last week.
Like what is going on with that?
Hamstring injuries, fine. They're just working them back in. They're kind of slow into the offense.
Okay, keep telling yourself that, Bryan.
Hey, years after years, 4 years in a row, Eckler has been a stud in the passing game. It was a fluke game. He's going to come back. He's going to be a stud. RB1 fantasy, lock it in.
The Chargers are going to be like, why didn't we do well last week? Oh, it's because we didn't throw the ball to the best pass catcher running back outside of Christian McCaffrey. Like, well, I'm not concerned now. If it's week 3 and he still doesn't get the targets he should, maybe I'll start to panic a little bit, but the Cowboys are a good remedy for a bounce back.
He also played the football team. Football team's got a good defensive line, good linebackers, good corners. I mean, Cowboys, if Eckler does not get a catch against the Cowboys, then we have a serious problem. Then you could start worrying about Austin Eckler.
Yeah.
All right. Now on to the Titans and Seahawks. Berkey's home favorite team, the
There we
Seahawks.
go. Let's go.
All right. Well, I actually am with the Seahawks this week. I think it's going to be another high scoring game. The battle of the terrible defenses and the pretty good offenses. Not the Titans' good offense last week, but the ones that we saw from last year. So I think that the Titans probably will not end up winning this game just from their week 1 loss. I still think they will improve from last week, and the Seahawks ultimately will come out with a win. I mean, again, Titans were killed by Chandler Jones last week with 5 sacks. Neither Julio or A.J. Brown could get open. A.J. Brown did have a better game than Julio, but Julio, I think, dropped like 4 or 5 passes. He had minimal
He did
targets.
drop a contested end zone catch too.
It was pretty bad. Derrick Henry started off the game with 5 carries for like -3 yards. It was pretty atrocious just to watch the Titans offense, which people believe that they could actually be a Super Bowl team. Probably not the case anymore. The good thing about the Seahawks is that they ran the ball effectively last week. Chris Carson had a game. Tyler Lockett was a beast. DK Metcalf was hurt, but you probably should expect him to do more in the upcoming weeks. So again, I'm expecting a shootout here. The Titans were embarrassed in week 1, looking to bounce back, but ultimately Russell fourth quarter, Wilson will probably get it done. Nice little 35-31 Seahawks.
So the thing is, I think this could be a good bounce back game for Julio Jones, just because as a Seahawks fan, I can't name our second cornerback. Like that's how bad our defense is. I think a no-name cornerback is gonna have no chance covering Julio Jones, regardless of how old Julio Jones is. I easily see Julio, he could have like 5 catches and a touchdown, and everyone's gonna stop panicking on him. If he has a bad game this week, then you can really start to tilt on Julio.
Did you catch that little tidbit with Mike Vrabel saying throwing some shade his way because he had a personal foul. Also, he had a few drops that game. He just straight up didn't look good.
He just dropped the ball.
Yeah.
It's coming to an end of an era where Julio Jones was once a great fantasy football player. Now it's slowly declining.
Yep, it's sad to say because I drafted him, but
I think you guys both did differently.
Yeah. Well, I still have faith in Julio Jones to have at least a wide receiver 2 on your fantasy team year. He's not a top 15 guy anymore, but he could easily still be a top 20 guy by the end of the season. But we got to talk about a team that is really looking out for redemption, but they got a hard opponent coming up. We got the Chiefs coming to the Ravens. High scoring game projection, 55 points with a 3.5-point favorite for the Chiefs. What you need to know for the Ravens, Tyson Williams showed he could carry the load in the first half, had that long breakaway touchdown. But towards the end of the game, we saw a very 50-50 split between Williams and Murray, which I'm still totally fine with. That's how this Ravens game functioned before their injuries. That's how it's probably going to continue functioning for the rest of the year. Williams currently does have the upside with the more explosive potential plays, but you can still start Murray and have confidence going forward. The Chiefs do have a better defense than the Raiders, so it'll be interesting to see how this backfield continues to shape out. For the Chiefs, we know they're just really good at football. You play one of their big 3, Mahomes, Tyreek, Kelsey. At any point of the game, you could have a 75-yard touchdown in your back pocket coming out of nowhere. One thing I did like to see was how many of the opportunities Clyde got. Now, it wasn't a lot on paper, but he just had the main percentage of the workload. I think he basically, Darrell Williams came on for like one play, and then everything else was to Clyde. I think going up against the Ravens defense, Clyde kills. He could still have another struggling week, but week 3 on, Clyde will probably have a good season going forward. But the one thing I did notice in the Monday night game is that one situation to be aware of is that Marlon Humphreys, the Ravens' number 2 corner, now the number 1 with the Marcus Peters injury, he looked really good blanketing whichever player he needed to on the Raiders. So if he does get put on Tyreek Hill, maybe he does slow down Tyreek a little bit. Tyreek is fast enough where he will have a few plays where he does beat Humphrey, but Humphrey is a good enough corner where Tyreek isn't going to run around this defense all day.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens are definitely banged up. Marlon Humphrey almost went down with an injury too towards the end of the game. That would have been really scary for the Ravens. But overall, with all the injuries that they've had, I think they look pretty good, but I don't think they stand a chance against the Chiefs in this game.
Yeah, it's going to be rough. Now, to get on to one of our final Monday night games, John, there's a death match coming up, and it's going to be a one-sided game.
With the Lions versus Packers. Think it's going to be one-sided?
It's gonna be one-sided statistically, but I'm gonna see a lot of fantasy points on both sides, I think.
Yeah, no, I think this will be a good one to watch. I'm excited to see the Packers bounce back. The over under here is 48 points. Packers are still favored by 10.5 despite their absolutely dreadful week last week. I got the Packers winning 28-16. I don't think it's going to be. I mean, they're beating the spread, but I don't think it's going to be an absolute blowout. I do think Rodgers and Adams will connect for a couple of touchdowns. I don't like. I have Rodgers in one of my leagues, and I was super pissed to see him only score 3 points because I only needed like 14 points out of him to win. I was really upset, but I'm starting them both with confidence this upcoming week. I liked what I saw out of DeAndre Swift last week. DeAndre Swift is a super talented guy. I had him last year in a couple of leagues actually, and he had 20 points this past week. And everyone was nervous about him because he's got a really bad offensive line. Jared Goff is now the quarterback, but I think even he's one of those guys that benefits from both a positive game script and negative because he's a great pass catcher as well. So I think he's a great RB2, honestly, the rest of the way. And TJ Hawkinson is a beast. I doubted him this draft. I didn't draft him in any of my leagues, but the dude is incredible. He had 20 points last week. I think he had over 100 yards receiving. He's got to be a close 3 to Kelsey's 1 and Waller's 2.
I think it really just comes down to he's the only pass catching option that's not a running back, and they're going to be in a pass heavy game script all season. If you didn't get one of the top end tight ends and you missed Hawkinson, you're going to hate seeing him in your opponent's lineup all year long.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Moving on to our last game, we need to talk about the leftover game because there's only 3 of us. I'm taking it this week. We're talking about the bloodbath. That's going to be the Buccaneers just massacring the Falcons down in Tampa. Score projection of 52 total points. Tampa's 12.5-point favorites. What do you need to know about the Bucs? Their entire offense is explosive. Anyone on their team could have a 20-point week. It's just they're all going to have good games. One guy's going to have a bad game in comparison because there's just not enough to go around for everyone to have 2 touchdowns per game, even though they wish it could happen. What you do need to look at is that Chris Godwin led the receiver room with 14 targets. Fournette seemed to have control over the running back room with Ronald Jones fumbling and finishing with a negative points on the week. The Buccaneers did say Ronald Jones is still the starting running back, but I don't believe a single thing Bruce Arians has to say about his running backs because he's always basically telling us the exact opposite. For the Falcons, they sputtered. We talked about it. They looked like trash. They couldn't do anything versus the Eagles. 35 pass attempts led to 164 yards. The only fantasy relevant player was Mike Davis. And Calvin Ridley, 51 yards, 5 catches. That's not what we wanted to see versus the Eagles. The Buccaneers defense is going to eat this team alive. The situation to be aware of is that this will be a slaughter of the Falcons. I would hesitate to play any of my Falcons players. I'd pivot off of them if I could, but something has to give in garbage time for them.
The Falcons are known for garbage time football last season. They'll all come around and circle at some point. I mean, Calvin Ridley's not going to suck all year, so I would keep Calvin Ridley for now because I think that good things will come out of garbage time for the Falcons later on in the season. Might not be this week because the Bucs are that good, but maybe for weeks to come.
Yeah, I agree. Not this week though.
Not this week. 52 now.
Yeah, it's gonna be all the 52 projection points. They're just for the Buccaneers.
Yeah, just for the Bucs.
So now to get into a segment that the Raging Rumney has installed, the Clown of the Week. So John, tell us what this is and let's kick it off.
Yeah, so this new segment is called Clown of the Week. And basically the gist of it is every week, the 3 of us are going to look through our listeners league and figure out who our Clown of the Week is. And that is someone that made a horrible decision that we totally disagree with and it came back to bite them. And so my first and foremost Clown of the Week is a man by the name of Ryan King. And Ryan King, I love you, dude. I love you to death. But
he still won, though.
And he still did win, so he's not that much of a clown, but still definitely a clown. He started Raheem Mostert over Adam Thielen. I just can't even come close to fathoming that sort of start. Adam Thielen was drafted above Mostert in a lot of leagues. Am I wrong there? Like, and it just so happened that Mostert was ended up getting hurt, but yeah, that's just that can't be happening.
The one caveat is that if Mostert didn't go hurt in another game that Mitchell did, it wouldn't have looked terrible because he would have finished with about 20, 25 points anyway. But it's just mostly going down literally on the first drive. It's just felt bad having that many points on your bench.
Yep. And for context here, Thielen had 25.7 points. Raheem Mostert had 2.
And my clown of the week is good old JD Ramon, starting not in one league, but in 2 leagues. He started Devin Singletary over DeAndre Swift. And in the other league, he started Kenny Golladay over DeAndre Swift, and Jamal Williams was still on his bench. Probably one of the worst displays of fantasy managers out there. He doesn't know a lot about fantasy football. I'll cut him a break for this week, but he took 2 L's. So I'm playing him this week in one of my leagues. I'm hoping for a dub. If I don't get a dub, probably quitting fantasy football for the rest of my life.
Some might say that's an Adam Gase move.
It might be. And I still have the picture with Juan as Adam Gase, so I might put that back as my profile picture for this week.
So my clan of the week goes out to my best bud, Arturo. You might have not played him in our listener league, but I saw you play him in another league that went together. He played Ronald Jones without really seeing the true breakdown of this backfield on week 1. I mean, there were high hopes. I mean, Cowboys have a bad defense. Ronald Jones has had games where he's been a top 5 running back, and he showed off why he's not, because he fumbled on like his second carry, sat on the bench for the rest of the game, finished with minus 0.6 fantasy points. Somehow, he still actually pulled off his win. He had a Goose and Ronald Jones in his lineup. It still won his week, but what could have happened with his points if he didn't play Ronald Jones?
It was pretty bad. He still beat me, which is terrible because I had 2 duds with Mike Gesicki and Brandon Ayuk. Apparently, Brandon Ayuk is supposed to be in the AFL because he's not ready for pro football, even though he was good last year. Don't get it, but we're going to move on.
I thought he was going to the Canadian League.
Yeah, you average 17 points a game as a rookie. You're just terrible year 2, apparently.
Apparently, not ready to be a pro, so I don't know. Screw Shanahan.
So that wraps up our week 2 breakdown, guys. I hope you had a fun time talking about football. I can't wait for Thursday. I love sitting and just watching football all day long and then getting to kind of discuss it with you guys. Any last tips that I have is just don't panic. We're still at the beginning of the season. Still, you got to watch how your players play out, see if the teams make any changes. The only thing I know for sure is that the Falcons suck. You guys have anything?
49ers are terrible. The Falcons suck. The Packers will be all right. And start your studs.
And the Cardinals are for real.
For real. Okay, boys. That wraps up this episode. See you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers.